After Sunday, we will officially be at the halfway point of the season. But first, we have Silverstone, another favorite on the race calendar, and fortunately for the fans who will be in attendance, there's a good chance we see one of these British drivers win on home soil, likely for the first time. Will it be Lando, continuing the momentum from Austria? Could the dreary British weather push George Russell and Mercedes to the top step of the podium? Or is it Lewis, for the 10th time at this track, but the first time in Ferrari red? And you still can't forget about Max, Charles, and Oscar. The playing field looks like it'll be leveled a little bit this weekend, and we're about to run through everything I think we'll see this weekend. All coming up next on the Chicanery Podcast. Round 12 in Silverstone, the British Grand Prix. I think we're probably in the middle of the best three-race stretch on the calendar between Austria, here, and Spa. This one is always circled on my calendar. The entire weekend is a spectacle. It looks like an absolute blast to go to as a fan. And usually we get some pretty awesome racing too. It should be an exciting weekend for the fans. We've got some special liveries coming in this weekend like we usually do at this race. McLaren bringing back a version of their Google Chrome car, which is also a tribute to their car of the late 2000s. Racing Bulls also unveiled a special livery. There's a lot going on with that one. Williams technically has one too, but there's not much that's different from their usual look. We do have 5 British drivers for the home crowd this year, technically, more so 4. Lewis Hamilton, Lando Norris, George Russell, Ollie Bearman, and Alex Albon, sort of. And there's a good chance we see one of them take home the win on Sunday. Lando has to have the highest odds, especially coming off of his win in Austria. But the weather doesn't look the most favorable for McLaren, which could bring them back down to earth and others into play on Sunday. It looks like it could be a cold and rainy weekend, which could be music to Mercedes' ears with the way their car performs in those conditions. I'm recording this Thursday morning, but as of now, there's a 65% chance of rain on Saturday and clear on Sunday for now. But yesterday, rain was forecasted for Sunday, which tells you everything you need to know about this place if you don't already. The weather can be very unpredictable, and rain is never out of the question. But because of that, and how the forecast is looking for now, we might get a very mixed up qualifying order on Saturday. This is a track, though, where it's easy to pass, and the true order according to pace should shake out over an entire race. The weather is going to be the biggest factor in the outcome this weekend. If things stay on the hotter and sunnier side on Sunday, it should be advantage McLaren. There are some slow speed sections, but overall, this is a pretty high speed circuit with a lot of fast corners. There are 8 corners to the left, 10 to the right, so there's an equal wear on the left and right tires, but between the switchbacks in Maggots and Beckett's, the long corners in Brooklands and Luffield, or the very high speed corners like Copse and Stowe, it's a lot on your tires. But even if the rain stays away, the key will be the heat. If it's hot enough and dry, we should see a good amount of tire degradation, which, as we know, is where the main advantage is for McLaren. But it doesn't look like it'll be that hot. Definitely not as hot as it was last weekend. I still think McLaren will be in the mix on Sunday, but this could be similar to what we saw in Canada. I don't think it'll be as bad for McLaren because this track just suits their car a little bit better, but the cold temps and possible rain will not be their friend if that happens. If it does come down to the 2 McLaren drivers, who comes out on top this weekend? I think I like Lando to have the edge. He did have the Canada incident, of course, but even with that, there's been a lot of momentum building his way the last few races. And this is home turf for Lando. That, of course, comes with his own section of stands in Stowe this year, so exciting weekend for him. Oscar's done pretty well around here too, P4 in both races, but sometimes we just see some magic in this sport with home races. Lewis winning this race last year and many other times before that. Leclerc winning in Monaco. Fernando winning in Valencia in 2012. I think we might see that with Lando this weekend. But again, this all comes down to weather. If Sunday is more on the cold and rainy side, Mercedes should be right back in this fight. Their car just thrives under those conditions, and they've usually looked pretty strong at this track. Last year, they gave us a front row lockout and a Lewis win, of course. Now, Kimi has a 3-place grid drop because of the crash with Max in Austria. But like I said, if the Mercedes has pace, this track will give him the chance to get around any slower cars in front of him. George really has a chance to come away with pole and maybe the race win on Sunday. And man, would that feel good for him with all of these Max to Mercedes rumors swirling. He hasn't been the luckiest around here, though. Since joining Mercedes, it's been a P5 sandwiched by 2 DNFs in 3 total races. He's been really strong in qualifying all season, though, and if he can get pole, or at least close to the front, George could put himself in a great position to control this race on Sunday. I think we probably find our race winner between the two McLarens and George, though. But even with those thoughts, Ferrari still could be up there. It looks like they won't have their new rear suspension until Spa, so a little bit of disappointment there, but their upgrades in Austria looked very promising for them. Now this weekend we get to figure out if that was more track specific or an actual step forward for Ferrari, but can this finally be the weekend Lewis really takes it to Charles? So far the head-to-head is 9-1 in races and 8-3 in qualifying in Charles' favor. Now of course Lewis does have the sprint race win in China, but he's been dominated by his teammate this season. But if he's going to turn it around and flip the script anywhere, it's Silverstone. Lewis has finished on the podium in every race here since 2014, which is a crazy stat, especially considering how much the Mercedes struggled in those last few years. He's won the thing 9 times. And Leclerc just doesn't have the best track record here either. He hasn't been on the podium since 2021, and last year was a very disappointing P14. The good news for both drivers is they have a much more competitive car underneath them. And it's a car that could put them in contention on Sunday if we get some external factors slowing McLaren down. The bad news for Ferrari is not having the rear suspension for a track like this, though. We heard the radio messages last weekend, but lifting and coasting probably continues this weekend. They just don't really have a choice with the high-speed corners and what that means for plank wear. But that alone might be enough to really keep them from a race win on Sunday. It's probably unlikely, but you never know if Max can pull off something crazy on Sunday. This hasn't been Red Bull's strongest track, though. Max has won this race before, but he only has 5 podiums in 11 races here, which on paper still looks pretty good, but in Max Verstappen standards, that's not that great. I think the most likely result is we see an incredible qualifying for Max, maybe even getting pole on Saturday, but then he falls back into the order on Sunday and finishes somewhere around P4, P5, P6. I don't expect much to change with Yuki either. We've seen him in this car for 9 races now since the switch with Liam Lawson. 3 points finishes, a P9 and 2 P10s. It's bad. And it's probably the car more than Yuki, and I think even Red Bull sees that now, but this doesn't look like it's going to have a good ending. All right, let's talk some midfield teams. Racing Bulls. I expect a strong weekend from them. Compared to the other midfield teams, they've been a slight step ahead of everyone, and they've produced good results at some very different tracks. The last 2 races have been a little bit of a dip for Isaac Hedjar, but look, that's expected as a rookie, and he's definitely shown us enough already this season. I think Sauber keeps it going this weekend too. 3 straight points finishes for Nico Hülkenberg, and the last 3 races have been the 3 best results for Gabriel Bortoleto. Everything looks like it turned around for them in Spain. Whether that was the technical directive change, whether that was upgrades, maybe a little bit of both, this is a different team than the one we saw in Australia to start the season. How about this stat? Over the last 3 races, Sauber's come away with 20 points. Red Bull's come away with 19. Imagine hearing that in 2023. A new floor and bodywork for Aston Martin this week, and it builds off the Imola upgrade package, but the hope is this upgrade helps with the cooling of the rear tires. If it's cold and rainy, we might not see the upgrade's true performance, but it's an upgrade that should help them throughout the summer. I expect Fernando to continue his form and probably finish in the points on Sunday. They've really turned things around since that Imola upgrade, and it doesn't look like that'll stop anytime soon. It'll probably be another tough weekend for Lance, though. I don't know what to say anymore with him. Maybe it's Fernando outdriving the car, maybe it's Lance underperforming, but we rarely see a difference in performance between two teammates go on for this long. And it's a situation that doesn't look like it's changing. Can Williams finally end this nightmare streak? 3 straight DNFs for Alex Albon. Sainz didn't even start the race last weekend. They had 51 points the first 7 races between their 2 drivers. Over the last 4 races, they've only had 4 points. This was a little bit expected, though. Williams announced earlier than anyone that they were closing the door on the development for this year's car and turning their attention towards 2026. And this dip in performance is a result of that. Unfortunately for Williams, I don't expect them to finish in the points on Sunday. Things will probably be better for them if it's a little cold and rainy, and this track is a little better for their car too. But even if the conditions are ideal for them, I think they've just fallen a little too far behind the Saubers, the Haas's, the Astons, or at least one of the Astons. And even when things were great, they were still on par with Racing Bulls, so that's another team they've fallen behind. It'll pay off in the long run, but there are going to be some struggles for now. I don't know if it's the best weekend for Haas either. It's hard to predict with this team. Their car can be so up and down, and even the drivers don't always show a lot of consistency, and usually one's having a good weekend and the other isn't. But for this weekend, I don't think this track is a great match for their car. Looking at the season, they've struggled at the high-speed circuits. I also worry a little bit about Ollie Bierman handling his first home race in F1. There's just going to be a lot thrown at him this weekend, and he's just not used to it yet. And there's a good chance some of those things become a distraction. There's a good chance the struggles continue for Alpine this weekend too. Last place in the constructors' standings and only 2 points finishes from Pierre Gasly this season. They have a lot to figure out to meet Flavio Briatore's aspirations, but the one who has the most to figure out is Franco Colapinto. Could this be it for him? It sounds like it might be. When this driver swap happened, we were told Franco was being given 5 races, and last weekend was the 5th race. In those 5 races, 2 P13s, 2 P15s, and a P16. Compare that to Jack Doohan's 6 races. He had 2 DNFs, a P13, P14, P15, and P17. I guess Franco has the better record, but both aren't great. So what does Alpine do? I think the right answer is that they just be patient, but they've already shown us that's not an option for them. And it looks like there's a real chance we could see Valtteri Bottas or Sergio Perez racing for them this year. Franco needs a miracle on Sunday, at least a points finish. But even that might not be enough at this point. All right, finishing up with my podium predictions for Sunday. P3, Oscar Piastri. P2, Lando Norris. And P1 taking home his first home win. I've got George Russell. I just think the weather is going to be a huge factor this weekend. And I think it's going to play right into Mercedes' hands. I think Kimi will have a pretty good weekend too. He will be hurt by the 3-place grid drop. But I think he'll have enough pace to get around some of the Ferraris, probably Max Verstappen too, and get up there, probably finishing P4. After that, I do like the Ferraris. Maybe Max Verstappen in the middle of them, but probably those 3 drivers coming up next. And then after that, we're probably going to get some midfield teams and a mix of those. Maybe Yuki Tsunoda in there, if he's lucky, if he's on top of his game, a result he really needs. But I think it'll be more so midfield teams than him. I do want to touch on the whole Max Verstappen situation a little bit right now. Of course, I have talked about it in previous episodes and given my thoughts there. Look, it looks like it's probably happening. The important thing with all of this is we've heard these rumors for a long time now about Max's exit clause, about the talks with Mercedes, friction with Red Bull. The important thing to realize at this stage is no one's denying anything. Max's team is not denying that they're talking to Mercedes. Mercedes is not denying that they're talking to Max or that they are still a little hesitant to sign George Russell. I think that says a lot. And we're going to really find out in the next few weeks because Toto Wolff has said he's going to make an announcement on their driver lineup for next year in the next few weeks. So we should expect that soon. But also, too, that kind of coincides with how Max's contract works out, at least from what we've been hearing, with the exit clauses. And if Max and Red Bull are below 3rd in the standings, one of those exit clauses kicks in. So we're at the halfway point after this weekend. And that's the language that we've been told about in these contracts. So we should really start to see some of these things unfold. If this does happen, you have to feel for George Russell. I mean, just, again, he hasn't done anything wrong in this situation. He came in, competed against Lewis, put up a great fight against Lewis as a teammate in those 3 years. And he's been outperforming Kimi almost every single weekend, winning races, getting podiums, getting the results the team wants. It's just, unfortunately, it's the way it goes sometimes. But we should see some news on that, probably not this weekend, but in the next couple weeks. I expect we might hear something before Spa. Of course, we have 2 weeks off after this weekend, so definitely stay tuned into all of that. I did over the weekend also see the F1 movie. Just a few quick thoughts on that. I mean, for those who haven't seen, I'm not going to ruin too much about the plot or give away any spoilers. It is a little Hollywood. There's no getting around that. I did think the plot, I would have liked a few more changes to the plot, but I thought overall it was good. It was a good story that did seem a little based in reality. I don't know if an older driver would ever get an opportunity like that. In fact, I probably know for certainty that wouldn't happen, but the actual avenue that he got into the sport in the history and everything, it did have some factual consistencies there, but overall, take away the technical side of it as an F1 fan, it was a great racing movie. There were a lot of awesome action shots, some good acting too, and it was one I enjoyed. Now, I do want to go back and see it a second time just because I think the first time you go into it, especially, being someone who watches the sport as consistently, as we do, you go into it with a little more of a technical mind than you should have, and probably not enjoying the film for just being the film that it is. So, want to go back and watch it a second time just to kind of enjoy it from more of a spectator film, side of things. But again, overall, I thought it was a good movie, and I thought it was a good look for our sport. All right, that'll do it for today's episode previewing the British Grand Prix. I'm excited for this weekend. I really don't know who's coming out on top. McLaren's, Mercedes, maybe Red Bull or Ferrari. Maybe we're surprised there, but I think we're going to get an awesome race weekend and a lot of chaos with weather, maybe some safety cars too. I will, of course, be back on Sunday with a recap episode of everything we saw in the Grand Prix and through qualifying and everything else this weekend. Thank you to everyone for tuning in and listening. Till next time.